I've been doing this now since full-time since October 2012, so coming on 10 years. And my sort of hunting ground is media, advertising, comms, and tech business. I saw the gap because in my previous life, I owned quite a large food manufacturing business. That was from like 94, 95 to about 2012. And through that process, I had a business coach, and his clients were a lot of creative businesses as well. And it always struck me how poorly run those businesses were. So the more creative, artistic the owner was, the worse that business was generally run. Because I think by nature, guys don't like sales and spreadsheets and the ratios and finance and all those sort of things, which are massively important, obviously, in running a business. And that's kind of where I come from. I come from a non-creative agency space, but I understand how to run a business. I understand the underlying 80% of academics of how to run a business. Yeah. So been doing it since 2012. As I say, is that I've been very fortunate in getting involved in the agency world. I'd say 99% of my clients are entrepreneurial or owner-run. I try to avoid the corporates where possible, just from a bureaucracy and pain perspective. So mostly owner-run businesses, anything from 2-3 man right up to the 300-man agency. And then, I don't know, for my sins or my blessings, I'm not sure which way you look at it, but there's obviously been a massive immigration out of South Africa over the last 10 years, as typical. So I now have clients spread across the North Americas, the Europes, Asia, and Australia. Obviously, predominantly still South African based. My clients are Joburg and Cape Town, but I have now fingers in lots of different pies, and it gives me a very weird perspective of what's going on globally and where those trends are sort of leaning, and obviously how my clients can take advantage of that on a more local perspective.
Yeah, got you. And that local is becoming less and less relevant these days anyway. I mean, and that's, I guess,
100%.
We're talking about business process outsourcing and whatnot. But I think just to touch base on what you just brought up as well about how a lot of the agencies you work with, this is what we see a lot of the time. And you guys might have caught the bitch agency videos that I've been doing in the community, talking about some of the issues that I pick up with agency owners as I work with them. But that what you've hit on there is, and we always come back to this, is so many agency owners get into or start running a business, start running an agency because they are great at one particular thing. They're fantastic web designers, they're fantastic graphic designers, or whatever it is. And they love it, they're passionate about it, but they're not passionate about business. And what lands up happening is they become really strong at the creative side or at the execution piece, but they're absolutely horrific at running an actual business. And I guess just to segue into what we're talking about today, guys, is business process outsourcing, which is something that Brent wanted to talk about, because it is something that's, especially in the world post-COVID, even pre-COVID, this is something that's become a real opportunity for agency owners in particular to take advantage of.
So I think, Stephen, what's interesting is that pre-COVID, like, we wouldn't be doing this even, right? Like this, obviously the access and availability and the remote work, we all understand that now at a different level. But if I think pre-COVID, how many of the South African clients I had who were trying to penetrate UK or the European market, and how difficult it was just to get like FaceTime with people or sell them the dream that we can do the work from here. Yeah. It was virtually impossible unless you had someone on the ground or a client took you with you. Very difficult to grow a business internationally. Yeah. And obviously from here, we obviously always trying to sell in some kind of forex, whether it's pounds, euros, or dollars. We're looking for alternative currencies. And then obviously COVID happened, and now the availability and the access and people's understanding of how to engage with you, regardless where you are in the world, has just become so much more palatable. Yeah. So that's the first big unlock, is that people have realized that. And then what I've seen is that I've had a lot of clients here where there's 2 or 3 or multiple partners, and 1 or 2 of the partners piss off somewhere else in the world, and they become the sales account manager for wherever they are in the world. And then they start feeding the work back to South Africa to do the work. Yeah. And it works incredibly well 2 hours either way of the time zone. So, UK to sort of Germany works incredibly well. And I think that UK, Amsterdam, those places where English is obviously prevalent or easily usable, what I found is that because of the rand dollar or the poor exchange rate, I don't think that we're especially cheap. Like, we're not dirt cheap, but we're cheaper. Yeah. We speak the same language. Our skills are as good. I think that certain skills we're actually exceptional at. So I think from a design perspective, some of the technology plays, we're actually really good as a country. And all of a sudden we can do the work for you remotely and no one's questioning it. It's the sales function up front, which is the challenge. How do you get the work?
Yeah.
But the outsourcing it and sending it back to a machine or factory in South Africa that produces it has become fairly common. To a point where there are guys in Cape Town that have 200 software developers all being offshored to Europe. So all that skill is just being sold in euros. They don't do any local work. And no one's questioning where the work's being done. So if you thought about Indian call centers 5-10 years ago, I think South Africa is becoming that for digital skills. The knock-on effect of that obviously is the fact the South African market hasn't got enough talent. Talent has been leaving and has been leaving in education, I think is failing us to some degree. And now the fact that the guys are sitting here but doing the work internationally, obviously they're not working locally, massive drain on the talent pool. The conversation with my clients predominantly is not how do I get the work, it's how do I find good talent and retain good talent at an affordable rate, right? Becomes very, very challenging. So I'm seeing a lot of that. And then guys doing very smart stuff in terms of outside of the timelines, putting in the 24-hour account manager. Or I've got one particular example of a sort of a WordPress machine of an agency that just pump out these WordPress sites, landing sites and landing pages and smaller sort of brochure sites. And they've now employed similar skills in the state of New York and in Singapore. So the guys do 8 hours here, 5 p.m., hand off to New York. New York picks up the same piece of work, produces the work for the next 8 hours, hands off to Singapore, 8 hours, hands off to SA. And their USP's been, it takes us a third of the time to produce the work that anyone else does because we just work 24 hours a day, basically. So remarkable stuff when it's that kind of technology or that kind of, you can pass the work off, pass the baton on, incredibly smart. So they're able to sell to Europe and then produce 24 hours a day, which I think is incredible. And again, unlocked because of what's happened through the COVID period.
Yeah, COVID's 100%. And I mean, what you're describing is 100% our space in terms of what we do at Globital. It's resourcing out of affordable, high quality, but low cost centers. I mean, our entire team, well, most of our team is in Pakistan, but guys, all over the world. Our copywriting is done in South Africa because it's English first language. And I agree with you about South Africa. We've got a great talent pool and whatnot. We're a little bit more expensive. It's a little bit more difficult to execute because of the rand is more expensive than the rupee, for example. 100% what you're saying is it's what's quite interesting what you're saying there as well is the innovation that COVID has kicked off in terms of this 24-hour clock that guys are running. I mean, we've got a similar thing with our customer service team, which is 24 hours around the clock, because we recognize, I mean, we've always been a global company, but we recognize that there's more and more people just logging on going, I don't need to be in X place to get X done. I can get it done anywhere in the world. That 24-hour clock thing is a really fascinating thing that they're pulling off.
And then sorry to interject here, but something else that's also become very transparent through this COVID period is that a lot of agencies talked good game pre-COVID, but they were very much input-based. So are you sitting at your desk? Are you clocking in at 9? Are you leaving at 6? We're watching the work, right? So input-based. And then obviously with remote work and the change in the way we're working, their culture has changed into one of output-based sort of measurement, which is we don't care where you are, we don't care when you're working, as long as you're doing the work quality by deadline, right? And that culture then unlocks a whole bunch of opportunity to do work different hours. So when guys are doing longer pieces of work, bigger project work, as opposed to the daily piece, the requirement of going, are you sitting at your desks, completely gone. So now the question is, we actually don't care where you are or what time of the day you're working. We've got a deadline in 2 weeks, Friday. As long as the work is done by then, it works that you're in Pakistan or South Africa, it's actually immaterial. And I think what's interesting about the Pakistani, the Bangladesh, that entire conversation is that the barrier has always been the language barrier. The work quality to a level that's been acceptable, but it's trying to get the guys to communicate and understand how to do the work and to our standards been a problem. So that's obviously where you guys have done well, is that you're intermediary, your language is English first language, you're able to translate that. And I think that the frustration of the Europeans working with the Eastern Europeans and the Asians has become a problem, where they're going, yes, they're cheap, but it's actually just painful. Whereas in Africa, we're still cheaper, than the UK, more expensive than Asia, but the ease of use is so much better.
Yeah, yeah.
So the guys are happy to pay a small premium on the Asian prices to deal with the South African market.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, it's spot on. It's a challenge that we've successfully overcome. It did take a while, and it did take a lot of, as you say, that painfulness, particularly also around culture. You know, getting the Asian cultures to understand they're a culture that's based around service in such a big way that it's very hard for them to say no. And they literally will say yes to anything, whether they can do it or companies will meet that or not. And it really was a challenge for us to get over, which we managed to, you know, they follow our first world standards, but it is something that's a real big challenge getting over that. What you said there as well was quite interesting about the European market, which I'm learning now in the States as we grow into the States, is the States is, I mean, as you can imagine, is a bit of a wild west. Everybody's there and they're just willing to take a chance and get going and let's just pull the trigger and go. Whereas in the UK in particular, we found quite a big resistance to the outsourcing market. And I was talking to the outsourcing model and trusting particularly people, even in South Africa, even with our writers who are in South Africa, who are fantastic world-class writers, ex-journalists, you know, PR people, just to get the UK people, the UK agency owners to trust. Huge uphill battle. And I was talking to a business coach out there, or the agency coach out there, who I was running that by, and I was saying, hey man, what's going on in the UK? Why are they so suspicious? Why does it take me so long to get through a conversation with them to say, hey, just trust us. We'll give you £1,400, we'll give you $1,000 to use with us as a free trial, no risk. Just come and try us out, just so we can prove to you that we're great. And even that won't get them on through our doors. And he kind of explained to me, he said, you know, the reality was the early 2000s to 2010s, even early 2010s, a lot of the UK was burnt by that outsource model. They learned a lot of that. They were absolutely put off by the bad quality of work that they were getting. So now that uphill battle of getting outsourced, even to South Africa, as I say, it's like a whole other conversation. You really have to prove to agencies that you can support them and that you'll meet their deadlines. So,
but there is something else that's interesting is that outsource model historically, as you just mentioned, was, can you do this? Yes, we can do it. And they would say yes to everything, right? Yeah. The South Africans have got a slightly different mentality to that, because what's happening here is that we are actually experts in our fields. So it's an example, but like a UK client is looking for UX design. There are great UX designers here. When they go, oh, can you do my social media? The guys go, no, we can't.
Yeah.
So we're able to become more niche in terms of the quality of a particular vertical of services, where the Asians go like, yeah, we'll just do everything. We can solve everything for you. So I think that with time, the guys are going to realize that they're looking for particular skills as opposed to like one-stop shop. South Africa is not a bad place.
Yeah.
The other thing as well, which has also become very obvious to me, is that South Africa, we tend to do a little bit of, so agencies tend to grow into a little bit of everything, full service, whatever you want to call it. And we try and solve everything for everyone. What I'm realizing in the States is that the sheer size of the market is that you can just be a single service business and pick up literally thousands of clients in the States and not have to figure out what the horizontal growth of service looks like. You don't need to do that. Where in this country, you reach a point where if you're only selling in South Africa or even in the UK, you've then got to add additional services to grow your basket.
Yeah.
The States is a whole different beast. So I think that the way you strategically approach your services could be different if you're selling to the States or anywhere else.
Yeah, and that's a bit of good advice there, guys, is, you know, all too often agency owners are obsessed with becoming a full service agency. And while it's important and it's nice to not have to turn away business and say, yeah, we can do SEO, yeah, we can do web design, we can do copywriting. It's nice to be able to do that. This is advice that I give to agency owners all the time. If it's going to cripple your business or it's going to destroy your ability to deliver quality and it's going to ruin your reputation, don't do it. You know, rather
you're adding complexity. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. Rather be an agency that does 3 services fantastically than does 50 services bullshit.
Yeah. 100%.
Anything else you want to add around this outsourcing piece? Because it's quite an important one. I mean, I think it's something that, and the irony is, I mean, what would you say to an agency who's sitting on the precipice who's saying, hey man, I'm really tempted, but I'm not sure. You know, what would your advice be to them?
Well, I'd say, you know, crawl before you run. But I think what is important is, and I'm talking about South Africa specifically as the outsourced partner here, is that we all know multiple people that have left the country who may or may not become clients of yours, but have now developed a network of their own.
Yeah.
So like, kind of park your pride, get on LinkedIn, get on Facebook, get on WhatsApp, reach out to those guys and go, hey, you know, by the way, we're doing X, Y, and Z. Who do you know?
Yeah.
And just start that process, right? I also think what's incredible around the freelance space, that you can go and find freelance account managers and freelance salespeople in the regions that you want to sell your services to. So relatively low risk, possibly a higher commission, bit of a basic. But I think that finding a person who's got local language, local knowledge, understands the culture is imperative. And if you, something else that I've seen the guys do here is that if you are genuinely wanting to strategically pick up work in a different region, so hypothetically you want to start doing UK work, stop watching and stop reading everything that's not UK based, right? So subscribe to the BBC, read all the local newsletters, start watching the politics, start understanding the sports, because a lot of the hesitancy of them spending money with you is, you don't understand my world. And if you can talk about the soccer and the politics and Brexit with some level of knowledge, they suddenly go, oh, you're not as foreign as I thought you were. And that often just that ease of use removes a bit of friction in the sales process. So like, don't just think that your service is good enough. You got to wrap that in the sales language of understanding their local context. Hugely important.
Yeah. It's what you're describing there is caring. You've got to care about them, and you've got to show them that you care about them in their world. And it's so funny because in the last pitch agency that video I did, I think it was late last week, was exactly that around niche. I was talking to an agency owner who was ready to pack it in on a niche after 10 months of working in it. And I was like, you don't even care. He didn't particularly even like the people in his niche. He didn't like that it was lawyers. And he was like, no, I don't really particularly like him. I'm like, mate, how are you gonna try and sell to a lawyer? You don't like the person, you don't like what he does for a living. You know, it's exactly what you're saying there, is you've really got to care deeply about what you do.
Well, it's the reason why I've niched into that media advertising, comms and tech space. Firstly, I like the people, I like the creative space, I like the technology and what's happening in the technology space. And the more I do it, the better I become at the space, because you say you want a mid-level UX designer. I know what they are, I know where you can find them, I know how much they cost, I know how to onboard them, I know how to incentivize them. Where if I was working with lawyers or working with pharmaceuticals, I don't know the first thing about label laws in the pharmaceutical world. So I've become a specialist because I actually do like the space. I appreciate working in that environment. So I think liking the client space and trying to deeply understand that and read books and consume content around their world, massively important.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Great. Listen, man, thank you so much for taking the time. Really.
Pleasure. Thanks for the time.
Guys, just a heads up. So firstly, Brent, I'm sure you make yourself available. If anybody does have any questions, want to take the conversation further, this is what Brent does. You know, he helps agency owners just like we do, obviously from a different perspective. So if you're interested or you've got any questions, you managed to catch us on YouTube or in the community, please hit a comment down below and we'll get you connected with Brent. In the meantime, also I'm chatting to Brent about potentially doing something a little bit longer, a little bit more, with a little bit more preparation and planning, so we can actually add a ton more value. That'll be something, you know, a bit longer, webinar of some kind, but that'll come up hopefully in the coming months or something like that. We'll look into it. But yeah, Brent, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For taking the time.
All right, pleasure. All the best. Chat to you soon.